Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rock Roundtable. And today we will be discussing the best guitarist of all time, Part 3. Now, if you haven't seen Parts 1 and 2 already, I will have a link to them in the description below, and I will, of course, strongly recommend them. But you can watch this first. Today, all panelists with us will be, in addition to myself, also Ben, Zach, and Matthew, who have been in every installment of the Best Guitarist series. And today, the guitarists we will be discussing, as seen on the thumbnail, of course, are Keith Richards, Homme, and Mick Jones of The Clash. Alright, Ben, who do you want to list off next?
I guess I'll discuss Keith Richards, because I did a lot of time thinking about this yesterday. So there's a number of songs I think he does good work on. Beast of Burden, which he's intersecting with Ronnie Wood on, I think it's quite good. It's a very good, smooth song. It doesn't have, like, the meaning of playing, I don't think, in some ways, some of the other songs we discussed have, but in some ways it conveys kind of, the frustration that Mick Jagger's character that he's singing about as feeling.
It's kind of a laid-back frustration.
Yeah, it's kind of a ploddingness almost to it. It's kind of like a Beast of Burden. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a Beast of Burden. It's just so kind of just
day after day, it gets tiring, you know?
Yeah, it's just kind of but smooth, but plodding, which I know is kind of like, kind of contradiction, but kind of not. I think that works well.
Smooth but plodding is what you get when you, put butter on bacon.
I think Honky Tonk Women also has a very good sound. I don't think it's very deep or anything, but, I think it just sounds good. It kind of evokes the southern past, kind of honky tonk feel. I think the riffs on it are good. I think that they're well constructed and are aesthetically pleasing. Even if it's not that deep. I think for something that's a little bit more substantive is I Can't Get No Satisfaction. I think there's kind of like I was saying on Layla, there's this kind of frustrated energy release that's darker and more permanent, I guess, than on Layla, because in Layla, the Clapton burst or kind of it's all being aimed in the song at like one specific situation, while it's more of sexual frustration. I think that the sexual element sometimes is conveyed through the kind of pulsing of the whip coming, and then the smooth playing by Brian Jones, the stuff that's been conveyed that way, but it's a more alienated sound. It's a darker sound. It's a deep, dark, sexual burst of energy. That is, he just very frustrated. It's not being fulfilled in any way. It's not being resolved in any way. It's just no satisfaction. So I think that that's a good example of a song in which the guitar conveys something that the vocals can't, of how the feeling is, of the qualitative element of what the song is describing, in a way that the vocals can't.
Yeah, well, I Can't Get No Satisfaction and Layla are certainly the sexual repression songs of all time. I think the ones that sum it up best, I think, it's generally agreed.
Yeah, another good thing I think is a song that I think is quite good is Gimme Shelter. Just how moody and sinister it sounds with the way the chord repeats, and then how the energy builds up into intensity up until the next guitar riff. Then it begins to build back up, and then in the solo, there's actually 2 tracks of Keith Richards intersecting, but both tracks of him, which I think works quite well. I think it's quite aesthetically pleasing, but at the same time conveys kind of this darkness. And then as the song transitions into the most intense vocals where, it's screaming, rape, mortal. It's just a shot away. The guitar becomes more and more intense because previously it became bubbling, I guess, kind of slowly building and releasing in such a way that makes the song sound very dark and stuff, and it begins to be very as the song gets more and more intense and the tempo goes up, the guitar becomes more and more like violent sounding. And I think all this is also defined by kind of a metallic sound that the guitar has on that song, but not at the very opening. A metallicness that builds in it, and I don't know what's causing that. I'm sure Zach was still here; he could tell us. But,
Also, I want to say, obviously, none of us have mentioned this, but Keith Richards obviously has quite a bit to do on the song "Can't You Hear Me Knocking" as well, with its long, kind of drawn out instrumental part.
Keith Richards is just like has been said as like a very, very good guitarist, and he was on my list as well. And like as you said, like with his work on "Gimme Shelter," I Can't Get No Satisfaction, and it's just fantastic. And I also believe he also did the work for "Start Me Up," which is like,
yeah, it has a great guitar, especially at the beginning.
yeah. Something else I kind of want to say is that, unlike what Matthew said, and I'm sorry I just caught this, but Start Me Up, the reason why I didn't list it is because Keith Richards was not actually the person who played the guitar on it. Instead, it was Ronnie Wood, who, I mean, shout out to. I don't think he's going to be included on our main list. Though if people want to contribute things related to him, that's fine. But he was involved in like a bunch of different bands, like Face as well. But he's been a guitarist in Rolling Stones for quite a long time, since the late 70s. So that's who's playing that on there. Shout out to his work on Rolling Stones songs, because he's on a lot of them. Yeah, that's what I have to say. That doesn't actually join the. I mean, I think Keith Richards is on there, but he's rhythm guitar, I believe. So I mean, I don't think what was being credited to him there is accurate. Also, I think in terms of talking about guitars talking, I guess, well, the guitar's not very important on the song "Sympathy for the Devil" for most of it. I do think towards the end, well, Mick Jones was like, "Woo-hoo! Ah!" The guitar towards the end does begin to make its appearance, and I think it kind of talks. It does a counterpoint to Mick Jagger's vocalizations, and also to people about backing him's vocalizations. That is kind of in a similar range as his, and is kind of just in some ways just kind of walking and combining with that. Yeah.
Yeah, alright. Yeah, once again, I want to say Keith Richards, great guitarist. So great that the Pope even declared him to be the reincarnation of God at one time. Alright, Zach, who's your next pick?
I'm going to take a wild card. I don't even know if Misty, you know who this is. I want to talk about Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age. I'm got a little bit of recency bias because they just put out a new album on Friday, and I've been listening to them a lot, and within the past month or two. Josh Homme is not technically the best player in the world, but it's the way he plays which makes him the best player in the world, if that makes sense. He got his start in Caius, which was a punk, almost proto-metal band back in about 1990. And they have a lot of Sabbathy sounding stuff. He decided to be unique in that he played his guitar through a bass cabinet and tuned down 2 whole steps so it sounds extremely low. And the Kai's albums sound awesome. They sound great, and it's mainly because of Josh Homme's guitar playing. And after that, he went on to play in Screaming Trees for a couple of years until they broke up. And then he formed Queens of the Stone Age. And it's his playing in this band, which, in my opinion, makes him one of my favorite guitarists. On the first Queens of the Stone Age album, he has the same kind of heavy, dark guitar playing. And you can hear that throughout all of Queens of the Stone Age's discography, whether it's on songs like Self-Titled, which are Regular John and Mexicola. And then later in the later albums, you have songs like You Think I Ain't Worth $1, but I Feel Like a Millionaire, which has some just so incredibly simple yet very heavy riffs in it. And then he has the most like melodic, most swagger guitar playing, and quotes of songs like "No One Knows," which everyone knows. Then there's songs like "I Sat by the Ocean," which are just have like very nice melodic playing. Even songs like "Make It With You" or "The Evil Has Landed," they just have so much swagger in them that it makes you just feel great listening to them. And then we gotta talk about them crooked Vultures. The riffs on that album are awesome. Gunman is one of my favorite songs that he's ever done. Yeah. Love them crooked Vultures.
Yeah. Also, I need to get in more to some of this stuff that you listened to, Zach.
Yep. This is another one. This is another artist where I started listening to them a few months ago, and I'm trying to. They're expanding my taste a little bit because, like, they do a lot of different stuff other than just heavy guitar-driven rock.
Like me when I used to like jazz rock but not love it, and I used to like Steely Dan but not love it, but then Matthew still talking so much about how he hates Steely Dan, I now love it to like an insane degree.
Steely Dan is indeed a bad band.
It is not. Alright, well, I guess it's my turn. For my next guitarist I'll be talking about Mick Jones from The Clash. He doesn't do too great, I guess, on the first album. First album's a great album, but it's not like a great, overly proficient, guitar karaoke sort of album. But he starts to be more, I guess, in line and more flashy and a bit more, I guess, arena rocky, or just, older rocky, sort of on Give Him Enough Rope. And he really has some great parts on that album. The opening guitar attack of Safe European Home, I in particular think that starts the album is a highlight. Just the kind of, very kind of, nervousness, but also kind of defensiveness, but sort of offense as defense sort of guitar playing going on throughout that song, is a very great, sort of addition to the song. On his song Stay Free, towards the end of the album, he plays this kind of more wistful, kind of nostalgic sound throughout, which ends with a kind of really good solo towards the end that really, I think, makes the song. Of course, I'll discuss more about that in my review of Clash's Give 'Em Enough Rope. Go watch that. I'm shamelessly plugging that here. Also, on the next song, or I don't think it's the next song, but the last song on Give 'Em Enough Rope, there was All the Young Punks, New Boots and Contracts, which I still can't make out any really of the lyrics to. But the guitar work on that album's great. He's got a really great sort of interplay with Joe Strummer's rhythm guitar on that song that I think works quite well. I think that's one of Clash's probably best guitar songs. It's just the guitar's all over that, and there's this really great sort of interplay between them, and it works very well. Also, from the album London Calling, you of course have London Calling, which it works very well, the guitar with the bass in that song, kind of together to make a kind of a ominous sounding sort of riff going on throughout. It's not as flashy. As I said, it's in some ways kind of subordinated to the bass. Very good work there. The song Spanish Bombs, that's a song I always think has really good guitar work. It's kind of in the background, but has kind of a meaning to it. The song I always feel like has quite a bit of, width and depth both to it, kind of almost a cinematic sound to it. The guitar's there, it plays, it adds. It's never really hogging center stage that much, but it's always there and it's always adding just a little bit of textural and meaning and kind of throughout. What are your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, I think that, in some ways, the Cash is less technically complicated than some of the songs that we've been talking about, and artists we've been talking about so far, but I think they, in some ways, do capture and construct a very good, raw flow for the songs, and it's still quite a bit of work to do that and make it sound good without repeating the same chords over and over again, which to some extent some punk groups struggle with. They can make these original sounding songs and stuff without, in some ways devolving into one kind of same old, or two having to go basically just recreate the evolution of 50s to 60s rock to what it became, to what they're stripping it down from in many ways. And I think that they very accurately capture a variety of emotions. Often anger, often have a sense of alienation through their guitar work, but just always full of energy.
I always feel like there's always, if you listen to the first two albums back to back, there's always a sense of weird progression to it. Mick Jones, in particular, I think, experiences it more so than any of the other members. Well, first album, it is very simple in a lot of places on guitar. The second one kind of brings it up to snuff. It makes it more similar to what you saw other sort of major bands doing at the time, like Queen. And they all, there was some more good heroics, there was more actual solos and stuff going on. And, you have all that, and it's very good. And, another song I want to discuss is I'm Not Down. That's a song I feel like was very good guitar throughout. It's very much a very present guitar in the mix. It is always there, it's always kind of chugging along, and that's kind of the point of it. It's I'm not down, I've been, all this stuff, and it keeps going, and it keeps going onwards, and it's upbeat, but it's never like this overly, fast, overly, fiery guitar. It's always a kind of steady, onwards guitar, but it is still very fast, it's still very upbeat, but it doesn't ever feel like it's overexerting itself, but it never feels like it's falling off or going away either, and that kind of, I think, fits the sound of the, it fits the lyrics, it fits the meaning of the song, I feel like, very well. And of course, there's also the song Walk the Casbah. It, of course, has a very kind of notable sort of guitar sound at the very beginning. It's just instantly recognizable. It's very great. I also, one other thing I want to mention is I'm not sure who is the main guitarist on Rebel Waltz from Sandinista, if it is Mick Jones or if it's Joe Strummer. As I said, Joe Strummer's usually rhythm guitar and Mick Jones is usually lead. I'm not sure which one of them's the lead guitarist on that song. As far as I can tell, there's only really one real guitar on that song, but it does this kind of more symphonic, orchestral kind of, waltz sounding bit, but on guitar, and it's one of the most, I guess, technically impressive guitar parts on the discography. But I couldn't figure out, I looked it up online, I checked the liner notes, it just doesn't say which one it is who does it. It doesn't have, the liner notes don't have lists for individual songs, it just says, it lists Mick Jones's guitar and then vocals, and it lists Joe Strummer's vocals and then guitar. So I'm not sure which one of them is the guitarist on that song, but there's a song where it's maybe not like the best guitar song, but it's one that shows kind of a proficiency and a range that isn't something you'd really expect from a punk band like that in terms of guitar playing.
Yeah, I would assume that Mick Jones is the guitarist on Rebel Waltz, so I'm not sure. But I do think that there's like a few places that we should probably build on a bit on what we just said. So first and foremost, I'm going to dispute your first claim, which is that there's not good guitar playing on the first the Clash album, which is, I mean, I know that that's not entirely what you said. You're like, it's like not that important or whatever, and it's minimalistic, which I'll agree. But I think that there were some examples of very excellent guitar work on there. I would say, especially on the song "White Riot," the aggressive guitar riffs are very good at capturing what we kind of talked about with like Neil Young's riffs on Down by the River, or like on Southern Man, in the sense of like conveying kind of this angry energy, though a lot more continuous than on Down by the River. But that
If you've seen my review of that album, you'll know that I actually gave that album a good review, the Clash of Sources album. I just think it's more of a specific part in the mix, but it's less of a. It blends in more with like the bass and the drums on that specific album than it does on Give 'Em Enough Rope. It's less, major. It's basically, even though they have a lead guitarist and rhythm guitarist, a lot of what feels like there is in on the first Clash album feels kind of rhythm guitarist-y, with it mostly just being riffs, kind of like what Zach said last episode with James Hetfield. It's more kind of that style in a way, although not metal, obviously.
Yeah, I think I mean, I'll agree that the guitar is not so dominant in it in the sense of it is in some of these other songs. But I think the guitar work is quite important on it, and I think that the guitar, more than the bass and more than the drumming on that specific song, at least, um, captures both the essence of punk and its roots in the old rock and roll, like Chuck Berry stuff. And also just kind of like the heat and anger that actually leads to rioting. Like, rioting is not like an ordinary occurrence. It's one that's being provoked of like a very energetic angle. I think that the guitar work on that song does a good job of portraying. Moving on, you did, I think, give a good description of Give Him Enough Rope, though I'm going to dispute your claim that has arena rock in it at all, honestly. No. I'll agree it's moving further from, like, the minimalism of
I mean,
punk.
it's moving from punk into a more sort of Brian May sort of style of guitar playing.
I can't say that, no. I don't think that that's accurate.
I mean, I'll gladly provide my copy of the album.
No, like, why, what reminds you of Brian May in that?
Look, there's often this weird sort of, there's a lot more solo, there's a lot more prominent guitar than there was on the first album. There's also this breadth, even kind of at times an echo to the guitar on it in London Calling, especially on songs you heard like Spanish Bombs. That really, to me, sounds a lot like just kind of the mainstream late 70s rock sound, which was a sound in a lot of ways, I guess, kind of pioneered by Brian May. And it just doesn't sound really like punk. And I'd say that basically makes it, to some degree, arena rock. I mean, it feels like it's meant to be played You know, it gets kind of flashy at times. On, as I said, it was never flashy. It was almost all rhythm guitar work. It felt like on The Clash 1977, but on Give 'Em Enough Rope, it is quite flashy at times. Kind of
I
honestly
mean,
my more preferred style. I like it, but that's why I'm calling it what I am going to call it what I think it is.
I agree that the guitar takes a more prominent role, but I don't think you can jump from that and that has echo sounds on it, to it's like Brian May or it's like arena rock. Like, I don't see any connection to what's going on there beyond. There are connections through rock and like from the time period level, but it's still a lot closer to punk than anything. One, and then two, I don't think there's a dichotomy, but it's like you're either punk or you're arena rock.
I never
Like,
said that, but I do feel like it's honestly starts drifting closer to a more mainstream rock sound, and maybe that's not necessarily arena rock, so to speak. I mean, it's the sound that existed before I guess the label arena rock did, but it doesn't sound really. I feel like a lot of the riffs are downplayed at least for Jones's guitar. Obviously Strummel's still there. As I said, they have two guitarists, but it feels like they're both acting as rhythm on the first album. Whereas it feels like on Give Enough Up, there is very much a sort of a maybe Rolling Stones-esque, or maybe not Rolling Stones-esque, but like, what band am I looking for? I don't know. It feels like there's very much a, kind of well-defined walls. Kind of unlike Rolling Stones, actually. Rolling Stones had a mix more. But between kind of this lead guitar that is quite prominent, has quite a few solos. It is very much a very key, maybe even the key instrument, as opposed to the first album where it was about layering kind of riffs, and then you had the kind of this drum beat, and also the bass, of course. Now the bass is still, and drum beat, both obviously still very important, but to me it feels like it's very much moved what is very, I think, mainstream sounding. And don't get me wrong, I really like what was mainstream rock in the 60s and 70s, so I'm actually saying this is kind of a good thing. Though some people who'd say this about Give 'Em Enough Rope is an insult. I've seen people say that Give 'Em Enough Rope is too polished, too produced, overproduced, etc. I don't believe it to be the case, personally. I quite like the sound of that album, but I wouldn't call it exactly.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
Probably what made the Clash stand out, especially to me,
I
compared to
don't
the
think
other
we're like
punk
gonna come
bands,
to any
is
agreement on whether it's
Part of what made
arena rock, like, or not, because I just start,
Ben, let me speak.
I don't see it, I'll be honest.
Ben, let me speak. Part of what made the Clash stand out to me among the other
I'm
punk
not
bands
even
is,
talking!
listen, part of what made the Clash stand out to me compared to the other punk bands is they had, after that first album, a lot more polished sound, a lot more polished production, and a lot tighter arrangements compared to a lot of other punk bands. I mean, the playing there could get very much more tight, much more proficient at times. Well, it did start to resemble, in some cases, more like the progenitors of punk music, like The Who, although The Who only had one guitarist, or, other stuff like that. And it very much feels like Give 'Em Enough Rope does kind of carry on in the tradition of, not specifically punk rock music, but rock music from the 60s, rock music from the 70s. I mean, obviously punk music was in the 70s too, but, it feels very much, very clean, very polished. The playing of the band's very tight, but it isn't overly, mixed together with this homogenous backing sound. It really does stick out more of the guitar on that album, as opposed to mixing in with the bass and the other guitar, and the drums. As I said, Give 'Em Enough Rope, it's very clear. It's Jones, he's lead guitar. There's Strummel, he's rhythm guitar.
Anyway, I mean, I'm not gonna dispute that they definitely moved away from like a pure punk sound, and that they won't like really minimalist, ever in like a committed way.
All I have to say is, I'd honestly argue that after the Clash 1977, their next punk album was maybe Combat Rock. I'd say, although there's still some more proficiency there, I'd say it has a much more punk sound to it than Give 'Em Enough Rope, London Calling, or Sandinista did.
I don't know. I mean, if their album's Combat Rock is the closest to Arena Rock, at least on some of the songs.
On some of the songs, I'd agree, but on songs like Know Your Rights, I'd say that's probably the most punk song since the first album, honestly.
Yeah, anyway, yeah, that's probably true. Now back to the guitar. So back onto whatever the hell was going on in some of that section. Back to Give 'Em Enough Rope. Did you? I don't think you discussed Tommy Gun, right?
No, I don't think so yet.
I would say Tommy Gun, despite the gun-like drums being the most notable part of it, I think the klaxon-sounding guitar playing, like a siren, maybe not like a police
Yeah, I mentioned that
siren
in the
instead
review,
of
I think.
Yeah, I think that that's quite impressive. And I think it gives. I mean, the song is about terrorist attacks and stuff, and it kind of gives the sense of emergency. And also, I think the guitar solo sounds almost like the alarm that they would play on like Walter Cronkite or whatever, when it's like breaking news. Back before CNN was like ba 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 ba, or whatever it's like now. But like what it was like, this just in. The sound they played before that sort of kind of sounds like that on that, which also kind of makes sense for the theme. So I thought that also deserves mention. Moving on to London Calling. I mean, you already discussed it, but I do think that on the song London Calling, I would say that I was around rough um rough equivalence with the bass on it. I think that the guitars pour on the opening, which also has the bass on it, obviously. I think is obviously very, very iconic, conveying both the sense of like a threat or like a coming doom, and also just London. Like it just kind of represents London now.
It has kind of it has kind of a gothic, but a kind of like dark, almost Victorian gothic sort of sound to it, in a ways.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Bum, bum,
Um,
bum, 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 you know.
yeah, I mean, I think that I also think his solo is pretty decent. But I think that yeah is a good song for them. I think Spanish Bombs, like you said, also I think does a good job. And that one you have both Strommel and Jones being the lead guitar, and a lot of the notes are being both of them. But then sometimes they're doing different things. I think kind of the intersection and harmonizing of that allows it to have this like Andalusian bounce. And I'm not just saying Andalusia because it's mentioned in that song. But also Andalusia, okay, back in Franco Spain, because he was from Andalusia, when he was promoting a unified Spanish culture, he just did Andalusian stuff. So a lot of the like music as like you think of as like Spanish is Andalusian because of that.
Is that a Gerudo
This
Valley
specific case,
Is that
Gerudo Valley?
Gerudo
Yeah,
Valley?
Gerudo Valley. That's kind of like that too. I mean, the most famous song that in America that's actually from Andalusia is "Hey Macarena." But a lot of like what you think of Spanish music with like the flamenco dancing and whatnot is from Andalusia because that was like viewed as like acceptable by um um Franco, even if it's kind of kind of weird because a lot of it had been previously kind of lower class cultures or national culture the Andalusian. I think kind of the Andalusian bounce of Spanish bombs comes from the coordination between Strummer and Mick Jones. On that, I think that works quite well. I think something similar like that happens on Rock the Casbah, albeit with us trying to get Arabic chords and whatnot.
Yeah.
And an Arabic sound on that.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think a similar thing is laid down. Looking at Mick Jones more personally, I think a good song, well, two good songs, obviously, Lost in the Supermarket and Train in Vain. I would say Lost in the Supermarket. Also still not, I mean, it's, I think, pretty intentionally minimalist. They're not in a punk way, but more of a supermarket-y way. It kind of has it kind of starts out as kind of a almost pedestrian sounding, like what, almost like elevator-y, music-y, kind of guitar playing, before developing kind of a rushingness, which conveys kind of like the existential crisis that is being represented in the song of being lost in the metaphorical supermarket. I think something kind of like that, albeit in a more punk, a more intense way, is on Train in Vain. But once again, another personal Mick Jones song. Has a good, I think, riff that conveys that stress, that intensity. Well, I give a more subtle version about Lost in the Supermarket. Not the same chord riff or whatever, but that trying to convey that stress. In Train in Vain, even though this is very upbeat, very, I mean, the lyrics are more despairing in Train in Vain, while the playing is like anxious. So I think that intersects very well. Like, kind of, we did discuss that a little bit, like in the Neil Young section about things. Maybe the lyrics and the music complementing each other, but not giving identical themes, but altogether capturing a complex set of emotions. I think does well on that.
Yeah, so I also quite like the guitar part at the very end of Stay Free, which, as I said in my Given Rough Rope reviews, kind of like the direct predecessor, sort of the father to Lost in the Supermarket, I felt like.
Yeah, and of course, obviously, Should I Stay or Should I Go Now, with its iconic riff. And also, which was, of course, stolen by One Direction in the song Live While We're Young. So that shows you how iconic it is that people are stealing it. And also, I kind of feel like it has a Latin, not jazzy, like in Santana, who we'll talk about soon, but kind of a Latin element to it that I think is interesting to see, like Mick Jones playing all these different styles.
Lilting Latin lovers making love by the laundromat. Lilting Latin lovers making love by the laundromat.
Very true.
So I had to come up with a building or like a place that's sort of L, and that's the first one that came to mind.
Yeah, I also have like a couple historical notes about Mick Jones before we move on. So first, this is War Magnificent 7. Now, but guitar playing on that song, not super impressive because of its funk influence. Like, the bass is the dominant instrument, it's the leading instrument, like it is often in funk. But I think, it's my understanding that Mick Jones is playing actually on that song is like 2 notes most of the time through it, just back and forth. Not 2 notes, 2 chords. But I would say I think it makes him notable in the sense of he's one of the founders of rap rock in that sense. In this, he played guitar on one of original rap rock songs. Albeit once again such funk influence.
Ben, it took Mick Jones an hour to play a single note on the guitar.
That's so. Very true.
It took him 5 hours to play a single note on his guitar. Hearing that noise was my first ever feeling.
Anyway, yeah. So I think obviously we're not going to be really talking about much rap rock and these best guitarist things. I don't think, but I do think that there's of like historical note that he's like.
I think we have a grounds to now discuss Fred Durst as one of the greatest guitarists of all time.
Oh no.
Very true.
Oh no.
And then also I was going to say
Gregory's not here yet.
that Mick Jones has continued to like. I think we have some I was gonna say he's still relevant. Before I started thinking about Fred Durst, unfortunately, which just destroys my mind. Mick Jones, I was gonna say he's like still been relevant and stuff. He's on the song "Plastic Beach" on the album of the same name in like 2010. Oh, I guess the album wasn't like super successful, but it's a very acclaimed album. So I don't really have that much to say about his playing on it. Him and Simon on it, and I would just like to say that like that shows that he's like still considered like an influence on even things that are kind of eclectic, not even just like punk rock or whatever, but like a pretty wide variety of things.
Alright, that's it for this episode. If you liked this video, please be sure to like it and subscribe to my channel, as it does help me out a great deal. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode of Rock Roundtable. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. See ya.